Hello and welcome to my August reading wrap up. I feel like I just did an August reading wrap up, but I feel like last year's August was like a couple months ago. Like, I'm just having a hard time grasping the way that time is moving lately. It's been a big year. I read seven ish books in August. There was a DNF. There was one that I just haven't finished yet. There was a reread. There was one that I don't even really want to count as a book, but we'll get into it. Overall, I do feel like August was not a great reading month. I'm not looking at this pile like, damn, yeah, that was some good shit. I'm looking at this pile like, ugh, I hope September's better. And looking at the books I've already read this month in the 2 weeks of this month. Sorry, this is a late wrap up. It already is better. It already is a better month. So let's jump in. I'll tell you about what I read. The first novel that I read in August was Gold Rush. I picked this up after hearing the Straight Up podcast gals interview Olivia Petter. They had a little in conversation episode. It was really, really interesting and it really sold me on this book. So when I saw the proof come into my work, I snatched it and read it straight away. And I really, really enjoyed it. I think it was really well done. I've spoken about it already. I put it in my Litfic for Romance Readers video and summed it up there. I'll briefly sum it up for you now. It is essentially a pre-Me Too consent SA story that opens like a romantic, almost fanfic. It follows a woman working in media who sparks a sort of flirtatious situation with the biggest pop star hottie in the world, and that doesn't go very well, and her life kind of falls apart after that. And the reason that I put it in the Litfic for Romance Readers video was because of that opening like a romance novel with all that flirtation and tension and suspense. It really sucks you in, and it does have those elements to begin with. And yes, it flips. It's a 3-part book, and as soon as you're in part 2, it's like sucker punch. The tone completely shifts. The first part sucks you in, and my reason for putting it in that video was because if you were used to reading a romance story and you start reading literary fiction, you're probably going to be a little bit bored, potentially, depending on what the story is, right? If you want to start reading books that cover more serious topics, but you're used to the dopamine hit that a romance novel gives you, then you're going to struggle potentially to get sucked in by a more serious narrative. This will suck you in and then feed you the more serious narrative. So that's why I put it in the video. And the reason I'm like offering this disclaimer now and like getting defensive is because I did get a lot of comments that were like, Gold Rush is not a romance novel. It's an SA novel. Yes, I read it. I know. So obviously those commenters are like people who didn't really pay attention to the video or get what I was talking about, but I just wanted to say, I know it's not a romance novel. And if there is anyone who watched that video and thought that I was saying that Gold Rush is a romance novel, it's not. It opens like one with the sort of tropes and tone of one. That's not what the book is. Anyway, it was really good. I really liked it, and I am continuing to recommend it. The next book I read is the one that I don't even really want to count, so I'm just going to like briefly mention it in tandem with the other book that I have yet to finish that I'm like slowly working my way through. I had a bit of a moment. I ordered these 2 books. They're non-fiction and they're on kindness. So the first one is this book, Will Make You Kinder by Henry James Garrett. Now, he is an illustrator, so this book is 50% quirky little illustrations, like these kind of this kind of vibe, right? With a little bit of like commentary on being nice. It was fine. I read it in like a night. Wasn't quite the depth that I was looking for. I also, though, picked up The Keys to Kindness, How to Be Kinder to Yourself, Others, and the World by Claudia Hammond. Now, this one is a lot more in the realm of what I was kind of looking for from a guide to kindness. This one investigates a lot more psychological studies and stuff, but because of that, it is denser and, not the most thrilling book. It is a, pop psychological kind of non-fic. So slowly working my way through this. We'll smash out the rest of it this month, potential. But I'm also just like not going through what I was going through when I was pulled to purchase these books on a whim. I DNF'd a book last month, which I keep now maybe it's getting old, but every time I DNF, I'm like, you'll be proud of me because I'm proud of me because I don't DNF. But this year I've actually been really good about it. It was one of my reading goals for this year to DNF more, and I actually have been. So I do think working at a bookstore has helped with that as well. Because there are just so many books to read. And so why would I waste my time on one that's not doing it for me? I think also the privilege of like not having purchased many of the books I read. So it's not as if I'm like, I need to get my money's worth. I digress. The book that I DNF'd in August was Die Hot with a Vengeance, Essays on Vanity by Sable Yong. Now, this is disappointing. I am disappointed that this book didn't work for me because it, first of all, looks cool. Like, that's a cool looking cover. And essays on vanity, essays on beauty, the beauty industry. She was a beauty editor for some big publication that I can't remember right now. And so it's like, this is an interesting perspective. It's kind of, I was going into it thinking this is going to give Trick Mirror vibes. It's really hard for me to talk about this without being brutal. I was bored and I didn't care what I was reading about. It just didn't. I was like, my eyes were glazing over every time I opened this book. It just didn't work. And I really don't think I got very far in at all. Like, I gave up pretty early on this one. Yeah, it's about 60 pages I read. Usually I'll give a book 100 pages. I gave this 60 and I couldn't do it anymore. And obviously DNFing any book is disappointing. Like any book not really working for you is disappointing. But I really thought this would be good. Like, I was really excited to receive this, and I received it from the US when it wasn't published in Australia. I don't even know if it's published in Australia yet, like now. But people were talking about it and it looked really, yeah. I like an essay collection, and I like when that essay collection talks about the beauty industry or beauty standards. I like Trick Mirror. I like Emily Ratajkowski's My Body. I will say, speaking of books that are a commentary on beauty standards, I've read a really, really, really good Australian one this month that I will be talking to you about in my wrap-up for September that you'll have to wait for, but I'm sure you can probably guess, or you can go to my Instagram and like see it. But just keep your eyes and ears and brains peeled for that one, because I think everybody should read it. It is really good. I reread Big Swiss because my bookstore was doing it as one of their book club picks, and I thought, amazing. I loved Big Swiss when I read it a year ago. I would love to come to the book club for the first time for a book that I loved. Usually the book club picks aren't like typically books I would read, so this was like, hell yeah. So I reread this to prepare for the book club, and then a little life event unfortunately prevented me from attending the book club at the last minute, which was really disappointing. And I am devastated about that, but I am also just a little bit peeved that I wasted a week of reading on a book I had already read and already loved and already remembered. Um, like I like to do a reread. I like to do a reread when I feel like I've sort of forgotten elements of a book I love, or like when it's been a couple of years of me raving about a book and I'm like, I need to check in and see if like this book is still as good as I keep saying it is. I only read this a year ago. I remembered most of it and it was still just as good as I remembered. And I just feel like if I'd smashed it out in a couple of days, like that's one thing. But the fact that it took me like a week to reread, I just feel like I wasted time. I don't know. But I do still love this book. It's still like such a great, funny, weird, absurd, dark, bad person protagonist book. I feel like I have spoken the synopses of this book 10 bajillion times. If you don't know what this book is about by now, like, welcome to Book Talk. It's clearly your first day. Booktube, here we are. No, that's patronizing. It's a fantastic book. And if you don't know about it, I hope you now do and that you go read it because it's very, very good. And despite feeling like I wasted a week of my life rereading it, I still enjoyed it. I then picked up Ordinary Human Failings by Megan Nolan. That is the first time I've said Megan. Every time I read her name, I say Megan Nolan. But maybe it's Megan Nolan. I don't know. I'm trying something new. I was never going to read this. I was going to read it when I first found out that Megan Nolan was dropping a new book. Then I read the synopses and I was like, oh, actually, sounds very different to Acts of Desperation, which was her debut, which I loved like severely. This follows a journalist who is investigating the death of a young girl. And he is getting in with the family and like trying to milk them for his story, basically. It's set in the 90s, and that's essentially the story. And so I was like, sounds kind of boring. Doesn't sound like my kind of story. I'm not really interested. And like a year went by, and then for some reason, I don't know what switched in my brain, but I kept seeing it in my bookshop, and I just thought one day that maybe I'll give it a go. I liked Megan Nolan's writing style in Acts of Desperation. I really liked the way that she captured the human condition and like really raw inner emotions and thoughts, and maybe this kind of story could still contain that. It was longlisted, I think, for the Women's Prize, so like it's clearly quite good. And so I just decided randomly to just pick it up and read it like straight away. I just bumped it to the top of my TBR and bought it and read it, and it didn't work for me. It did not work for me. I read it quite quickly. It is quite short, but it's also just quite boring. It is a little bit of an investigation of the human condition and like thoughts and emotions and stuff, but nowhere near that of Acts of Desperation. I did not get anything out of this book. It just didn't do anything for me. I think it will do things for a certain kind of reader who likes a certain kind of story, but I think that kind of reader is like quite far removed from Megan's existing audience or the kinds of people that are exposed to her. Like maybe it would work for a crime reader or people who I don't know. All I can say is that it didn't work for me, and so I'm gonna be mindful of trusting my instincts like I should have. Even if I love an author, if the plot doesn't intrigue me, then maybe I don't need to bother. Maybe I don't need to be every good author's completest reader, you know? Anyway, here I am, having read both of Megan Nolan's books and adoring one and really not giving a fuck about the second. And the last book that I read in August was actually one that I was sent. I was sent it from Magpie? Magpie? I don't know who the publisher is. Magpie? Do we know Magpie Publishing? I don't remember. I'm so sorry. It might be Bloomsbury. I'm getting Bloomsbury vibes. Yeah. Maybe this information is not important. I was sent it and it sounded really interesting and it was sat on my shelf for a while. And then the Shameless Book Club asked me if I want to start doing reviews for their Instagram. And so I'm doing that now. And this is the first one that I reviewed for them. So if you want to see my review of this book, go to the Shameless Book Club's Instagram page. The book is Allow Me to Introduce Myself by Onyi Nwabineli. Please focus. This is about a 25-year-old woman who was raised by a mummy blogger. Her stepmother, her birth mother, passed away shortly after she was born. And then her dad married like the nurse who was taking care of her or something, who was this white woman. And she starts documenting the 25-year-old, what's her name? Anuri's life on social media. And so her entire childhood was publicized, right, on social media. She's a mommy blogger. So she was exploited and that was traumatizing for her. And now she's 25 and she's like an alcoholic and she's suing essentially her stepmother. She's like, you need to take down everything and like kill all the businesses that exist because of me and all these kinds of things. Like, you have profited off of my exploitation and now I'm traumatized. And then the stepmother is starting to do the exact same thing to Anuri's little sister. And she's like, fuck, like, how do I don't know, like, save her from this? And there's all sorts of other stuff going on as well. There is a lot happening in this book. And going into it, I was like, this sounds so juicy. This sounds so interesting. Like, what a modern story. But it just tried to do way too much. It just bit off so much more than it was able to chew. Even like summing it up just now, I feel like I told you like 30% of the plot points, and there's still like all this other stuff that is going on in the book that I like. There's just too much. There's just too much going on. And it was dragging and I really wanted to DNF it, but I couldn't DNF it because I was reviewing it. So I had to finish it and it sucked. And it took me so long to read and it was just such a drain. And it was so disappointing because the storyline sounds fascinating and it could have been really good if they just like didn't try to do so much. Like, if they just stripped it back a little bit. So it's a real shame. I really wanted to like this, and I feel like obviously like more stories can be written about mummy bloggers and like child exploitation and like parental entitlement and stuff. But I just feel like this was such a unique premise that could have been amazing and it was not done well. And so now that premise has been wasted. Is that brutal? That sounds so mean. I'm sure there are people in the world who I need to stop like bookending my negative reviews with. I'm sure there are plenty of people who would like this book. Like, that's a given, and shut up. I didn't like this book. I gave it 2.5 stars for my review for the Shameless Book Club. Like I said, go read that review in full if you care to know a bit more about why I didn't like this novel. But yeah, bit of a shame, bit of a letdown. Like many of the books that I read in August. I only really enjoyed 2 of the books that I read in August, and one of them was a reread. And so I don't know, it's quite disappointing to like be summing this up. I feel like this video has a lot of negativity in it. But I know that September's wrap up, next month's wrap up, is going to be a lot more positive. It's really like, I'll be raving about probably every book at this rate. So don't worry. I am sorry that this was such a negative Nelly video. DNF, queens, be strong. DNF, trust your gut. Trust your gut if there's a book that is by an author you like, or a book that a lot of people are raving about that doesn't sound really like something you'd be into. Don't worry about it. Don't read it. You don't have to. Don't let the FOMO get to you. Looking in a mirror. Don't let the FOMO get to you. I need to listen to myself, honestly. But I'm slowly chipping away at my TBR, I think. I'm telling myself that. I need to tell myself, I need to believe that to be true, because otherwise I will freak out. I will have a mental breakdown. But I know that there are so many exciting books about to drop in the next few months, and I can't keep up. I'm really stressed. This video was entirely unscripted. I'm sure you could tell. I apologize for the chaos and the ramblings, but August was a shit reading month, so what are you going to do? You just got to lean into the vibe. Thank you for watching if you're still here. I am working on other videos. Believe it or not, this will not be my last ever YouTube video. Wow. Okay, I'm going to go. I'll see you next week.